Fantasy news
from the National Football League.
This is the instant replay.
All right, so we're already off track with our 3 lists of 3 concept because it's not going to really be 3 lists of 3 today.
It's too hard because there's so many fun things to talk about.
And it's hard to limit yourself to just 3 takeaways from last night. Also, I think each one of us, we had a lot of crossover, we would say, from last night's takeaways. But let's begin at the top of the draft. Saquon Barkley, the number 2 overall pick in the NFL's draft this year.
It was the first play of football that I watched.
Yep, very first
And
play.
I was like, it made me, I was a little tired yesterday. We've been working hard. And I leaned forward, sat up, and I was like, oh my goodness.
It's back. We're back.
He is.
Most important caveat for today's show, in my opinion, Mike, is that it's just one game and context matters. But Saquon Barkley's first run last night, 39 yards, it had people excited.
So you're saying I should not go in and move him up to number 1 overall in my rankings, is what you're saying? Too much?
Well, a tad over aggressive.
A little bit. I was tempted. I was in there moving him around a little bit.
Say, you could maybe keep him behind David Njoku. Otherwise,
okay, that's fair. That's fair. Maybe Joe Mixon in there, Juju, Smith-Schuster.
Sure,
yeah. Here's the thing, and I keep kind of harping on this. A lot of people get upset with us for ranking him so high as a rookie. He's never played it down in the NFL. How could we put him at 6 or 7 overall?
Now he has.
But here's the thing. I don't think we're even taking him at his ceiling at that spot. He could be the number 1 overall scorer in fantasy points this year. He has that ceiling. So
I drafted him yesterday 8th in our mock draft that we did. You can see the results posted on ESPN.com Fantasy now. And I felt like I was lucky to get him at 8th.
Yeah, I've seen him go 6th.
Mike does projections here at ESPN for us. This is a projections business. What happened last year matters in that it gives us an idea of what could happen, but it doesn't matter in the sense that there's nothing guaranteed based off of previous seasons. Saquon Barkley, though, did impress, finished with 4 rushes for 43 yards. I mean, if he keeps up 39 rushes or 39 yards per rush, he's going to be a beast.
But it's also the way he ran it. I mean, that's what was impressive to me, was he made a couple of cuts that where you're like, somebody else might have gotten tackled, and he made a couple moves, and you're like, that's exciting.
More seriously, exactly. He will be the focal point of this offense and gives them a back that they believe they have not had in quite some time. Tyrod Taylor, Baker Mayfield, both Browns quarterbacks, both played in that same game. And it's rare that a quarterback goes 5 for 5 with 99 yards and a touchdown and is just entirely overlooked. But that's what happened. I mean, that's exactly what happened last night with Tyrod Taylor.
Poor Tyrod. This is like the story of his career, right?
Super underappreciated, it feels like, for multiple teams now.
Right.
I would start with Tyrod Taylor because Baker Mayfield will get a lot of attention, and we'll talk about him in a minute. But with Tyrod Taylor, Mike, I think the question, I've been saying, hey, I have a hard time placing him inside my top 15 for quarterbacks, not because I don't think he has that ability on a per-game basis, but because there's a leash on Tyrod Taylor. We don't know if that leash extends for 16 games or if it extends for 6 games. Last night, though, he played like a quarterback that you'd expect to stick around for a while.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think come week 1, when we're actually doing weekly rankings instead of season long, we're going to like him a lot more. He will be in that top 15, especially in our scoring, which you lose 2 points for an interception. Best interception rate in the NFL other than Tom Brady the past 3 seasons. He had points with his leg. So I think there is going to be more fantasy value than we realize. And by the way, he has some pretty good weapons. And once Josh Gordon comes back, Jarvis Landry, Antonio Callaway looked awesome. David Njoku, we'll talk about him in a second. But I just wanted to throw this out here. This is Tyrod's connection with Sammy Watkins, the best receiver he's had in his career so far. 128 targets, 80 catches, almost 1,398 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns. I mean, that was a great connection. Now he actually has some very good weapons in this offense. So the upside's huge here.
Not sure if it's by design or not, but the very first play that the Browns ran last night was a 32-yard reception for Jarvis Landry. It wasn't like he caught it 4 yards down the field and then zigzagged for 28 more. It was a vertical shot to Jarvis Landry, which is so not Jarvis Landry based off what we saw in Miami.
Right.
Maybe a little bit of a subliminal, a subtle message by the Browns that he's not going to just be a slot receiver catching 9.5 yards per reception.
No, and I think that was one of the things that he was excited about with going to the Browns. And hey, if you watch Hard Knocks, you can see how Jarvis Landry's work ethic that he speaks to, his believing in practice. And I've actually liked him even more after watching the show. But I think that kind of connection between him and Tyrod they're both moving up for me in terms of guys I would look at when drafting close to the start of the season.
Let's get to Baker Mayfield, because I don't care whether he's a starter or not going into week 1. People are going to be asking us about whether he should be drafted, what his value is this season, what his outlook is beyond this season. Small sample size. Again, all the caveats apply. Put it this way. It's much better to have a quarterback show well, 212 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, than have a disastrous first night in the office.
Yeah, don't draft a backup quarterback.
Right.
And I don't care if it's Nick Foles. Unless Carson Wentz is not going to play week 1, I mean, you should not be drafting any backup quarterbacks other than rookie drafts or deep dynasties.
I just thought, I kind of just hearing all the hype about Baker Mayfield, I feel like it's a little more than what he earned on the first night. Keith, not cool, Keith. Don't get upset with me for saying that. But I
would never.
I just think keep it in check. I mean, he did some really good things. I liked the way he moved around the pocket. I liked his vision, that great pass to Njoku in the end zone. But he wasn't perfect, and he has room to grow. So everybody, hold on and let Tyrod Taylor be the starter.
For the sake of the hype train, we're lucky that Tyrod Taylor played well last night. Because imagine if Tyrod Taylor had gone 2 for 8 as opposed to 5 for 5. For now, though, Tyrod, of course, locked in as the starter. But, Stephania, let's sink our teeth into this a little bit. 585 days between action, I should say, for Andrew Luck. Just getting onto the field, to me, was momentous.
Huge. It was huge. And I couldn't be happier because obviously all the Colts fans are happy, fantasy fans are happy, but as a physical therapist, when you see somebody who's been out a year with an injury, somebody who, by his own admission now, I mean, I think we saw evidence of it before, but now he's actually articulated that he worried about whether he'd be able to come back and be himself again. And so it was great to see him on the field, but there were a couple specific takeaways from the game that I think are important from sort of the recovery and getting back into football standpoint, because it's not just about throwing the ball again. It's about how comfortable is he on the field, making plays when you've got a real defense coming at you. And so he took a hit to that shoulder and he kept going. He was sacked and he bounced right back up. Those to me are they're critical things that are never going to happen in practice the way they happen in a game. And they also provide more confidence for the athlete when they get up and they just keep going. The other thing is that we saw him complete some passes. It was nice. He did some different things, but there was no pass, no completion that registered more than 20 yards. So what that tells me is that he's probably in a phase where they are working on progressing his throwing. So he's not doing too much too soon. Everything feels very controlled, and I like it. But so far, that's an A from the rehab standpoint in terms of what he did in his first outing.
Mike, anything that you saw that caught your eye in that game from Andrew Luck?
Well, I want to see him go long. That's what I'm thinking about now as Stephania talks, because T.Y. Hilton's been one of the better downfield producers in fantasy football in recent seasons. So you want to see him progress to that. And so that's what kind of popped into my mind. But you're right. I mean, and what Stephania said, I mean, he looked good out there. That's a good start. And I'm moving him up my ranks. So
and
I hope you're right.
He said afterwards that he had fun playing. Yeah. I mean, you can't emphasize these things enough. I think we sort of dismiss them. But if you look at what he was saying, his language and his body language for real last year, and you look at how he came back in minicamp and the things he was saying after, huge.
Just a couple of cleanup thoughts before we get to double trouble for me. Or not cleanup, but just sort of leftover thoughts. Joe Mixon for the Bengals had a receiving touchdown of 22 yards last night. Excellent breaking of tackles along the way. A player that is a trendy pick for a breakout season, and you understand why. Now, the offensive line, which has been retooled, needs to play better for that to happen, but I was encouraged by what we saw from Joe Mixon. Kelvin Benjamin had made headlines before the game even begun against the Carolina Panthers.
Conversation or not a conversation?
Something between him and Cam Newton. If you haven't seen it, just go on, Google it. It'll be widely available online. He and Cam had a conversation, had some sort of exchange.
Yeah, it didn't seem to go well.
Yeah, it did not seem to go well. It felt like a lot more of Cam talking than Kelvin talking. But obviously, Kelvin started it, so to speak, with his comments to Tim Graham in The Athletic. But Kelvin Benjamin did look good. He had a catch for a touchdown last night. I believe it was 4 catches in total for 70 yards for him. And the last thing that I would say, a lot of conversation about Dak Prescott this preseason. The practice report suggests that it's been a rough start for the Cowboys offense. Dak Prescott took one drive last night and hooked up with Michael Gallup on a 30-yard.
Michael Gallup. Are you moving him up your draft boards?
I already have him high enough, I think. I move him any further, I'll pass out Alan Hearns, in Dallas. So, I'm buying on him. I've been getting him a lot. I love that late-round flyer for sure.
Somebody from the Cowboys receiving group is going to emerge as a flex play in deeper leagues, would be my sense. And we'll keep an eye on whether or
Gallup
not
made his case last night.
Michael Gallup makes his case early.
Good player.
We're going to talk more about the Colts in just a minute, but first we're going to talk about underwear.
Yeah, that's right. Mike, this is what you get when you come on the podcast.
My favorite part.
Yeah, we're going to talk about MeUndies. So I always thought MeUndies was that really cool underwear brand with the fun, crazy prints. But it wasn't until I actually tried them on that I thought, oh my gosh, they're seriously the most comfortable thing I've ever worn. They release multiple fun prints each month in matching socks and bralettes. Now, Mike, you might not need a bralette, but I have some shark patterns. I mean, I don't know what patterns Daniel and Field have,